Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for our afternoon-evening celebration of the investiture for the appointments of Stephanie Teal as the Arthur H. Bill Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and the appointment of Nick Bambakidis as the Harvey Huntington Brown Jr. Professor of Neurosurgery. And I'd like to extend a thanks for all of you who've joined us as family, friends, department members of the faculties of University Hospitals Case Western, for joining us here for a real momentous occasion. As you know, during COVID, boy, did we get backlogged in investiture celebration, so we're still catching up. And I'm delighted with our two honorees this afternoon. It is really a joy for a dean to be able to provide professorship endowments to our faculty. It both honors our best and brightest, in this case, two of our eminent chairs. They allow us to keep our faculty excited and happy with their accomplishments and their visibility across our school. Just to remind you, the concept of professorships is almost 400 years old. The oldest that we know is from King Henry VIII, who had other challenges, but did found the Regius Chair of Civil Law at Oxford University. The oldest in the U.S. is the Harvard Hollis Chair in Mathematics and Natural Philosophy, established in the Divinity School there in 1721. Interestingly, divinity, of course, became part of physics. I guess it was divinity, then metaphysics, then physics. And right now, it's held by a woman, Mcaren King. My hunch is that Dr. Hollis couldn't quite have imagined that a woman would hold an endowed professorship. Our oldest chair is a little over 120 years, so I'm going to take you through it because it's relevant to today's engagement. Leonard C. Hanna Professorship was 1901 through a gift of Howard Hanna, obviously a Cleveland family, in honor of his father. And that's now held by Ann Harris in genetics, and more on Leonard Hanna in a minute. The next came Henry Wilson Payne Professorships in anatomy, which was established in 1903, also a gift of Howard Hanna, this time in honor of his childhood friend. The Payne family is obviously also a big family in Cleveland. That's now held by Agata Exner in radiology and biomedical engineering, and we'll celebrate that investiture next week. Then in 1906 came the Hanna Payne Professorship, now titled in experimental medicine, and that was a joint gift of Howard Hanna and Oliver Payne. These were two huge industrialists at the time involved in oil and shipping and transport. And that professorship was held for a long time by the late Nate Berger, who you all know passed away this past Saturday. I hope you saw my note about it. We just came from his funeral this afternoon. So the two chairs we celebrate today are also very, very deeply rooted in Cleveland and are also intertwined. It is amazing how our predecessors brought forward interest in the School of Medicine and the university. The Arthur Bill Professorship in Obstetrics and Gynecology was established by Margaret Allen Ireland. You'll notice there's no bill there, with the gift of shares from the M.A. Hanna Company in honor of Arthur Holbrook Bill, who was one of our faculty members, who in 1925 developed a modification of the Scanzoni procedure, which used forceps to rotate the fetus, and then it was renamed the Bill Scanzoni maneuver. And of course, I'm not an obstetrician gynecologist, but I'll tell you, hundreds of times I heard about my spouse coming home and said, I got the kid out with forceps, I rotated the head, and I didn't have to do a C-section. She didn't like doing C-sections, although she did them as fast as anybody. So, getting back, Margaret Ireland was a civic, social, and welfare causes leader. Her years of community service were really quite amazing. She helped to found the Highland View Hospital, was Ohio's Director of Public Welfare in 1957, was the first woman president of the Northern Ohio Opera Association, 1959. She was heavily involved in nursing and led many health reform maneuvers and initiatives in the city of Cleveland. She was president of the Visiting Nurse Association, chaired its building committee, and helped organize the Maternal Health Association. And she headed the Welfare Federation Community for the Chronically Ill and served on the board. In 1951, she established the Ireland Foundation primarily for nursing and hospitals. And interestingly, her husband was Robert Livingston Ireland, a name I knew when I joined here in 1983. And just at the end of his life, Robert Livingston developed lung cancer and took none other than Nate Berger down to the state to visit with Governor Taft. And they supported a $2 million gift to university hospitals to establish the Ireland Cancer Center. Now the Seidman Cancer Center, and now that is part of the NCI Designated Cancer Center. So I've come full circle back to Nate Berger through this association. Okay, now the next one, if that's not enough Cleveland history for you. Harvey Huntington Brown Jr. Professorship was established through the bequest of Harvey Brown Jr. and another gift from Leonard Hanna. I mentioned the Leonard Hanna Professorship. Harvard Brown Jr.'s father was a Cleveland shipper, manufacturer, and financier who owned the Harvey H. Brown and Company. Again, iron ore, shipping, railroads at the turn of the century. Leonard Hanna was a philanthropist, contributed over $90 million to our institutions here in Cleveland, and was a director of none other than the M.A. Hanna Company. So in 1941, he established the Leonard C. Hanna Fund, and as president and trustees was responsible of giving millions of philanthropic dollars to Ohio institutions, including both Western Reserve University and university hospitals. Margaret Ireland and Leonard Hanna were contemporaries, and they really did help the medical school, university hospitals, and CASE for many decades. So with that, I think I've given you enough history. I won't give you a test on it, but it's been enjoyable for me to be able to recount just how meaningful these past events are. And for our recent donors and philanthropists, it is quite amazing if you think about it, just how the longevity of an endowment at the professorship level is and the impact that it has over generations to our institutions. So I would love now to be able to introduce Stephanie Teel and Nick Bambakidis, who are remarkable individuals in their own right and incredibly deserving of these. But I have to let Dan Simon, Professor of Medicine and Senior Associate Dean of the faculty at UH, introduce them. But I do get to introduce Cliff Mcaren, CEO of University Hospitals, who will then introduce Dr. Simon. So Dr. Mcaren is the Chief Executive Officer for University Hospitals Health Systems and holds the Jane and Henry Meyer Chief Executive Officer Distinguished Chair. And if I can just remind you, in my experience in interaction with Henry Meyer, he told me he always would hire students out of college with a B average to Key Bank because they worked harder. So just keep that in mind. He was in December of 2019, Dr. Mcaren was appointed as the UHHS president. Prior to that, he served as president of the University Hospitals Physician Network and the Physician Services and Systems Institute. In those positions, he was managing the clinical integration of more than 2,500 UH faculty and experienced and helped us develop the incredible network that now we call UHHS. So he incredibly impacted physician productivity, all the good work that our physicians do at university hospitals and throughout the system. And before that, he was the chair of the Department of Otolaryngology and held the Julius McCall Professorship at Case, as well as the Richard and Patricia Pogue Endowed Chair in Auditory Surgery and Hearing Services at UH. And in his clinical practice, although his expertise is in hearing loss, chronic ear illness, and autosclerosis, vertigo, and other disorders, I will disclose my own personal medical information, and that is that I was in Florida at a fundraising event having lunch with a major donor for the Cancer Center and Barbara Snyder, wearing my white shirt, and had a nosebleed because of the dry weather flying down, and had to go to the bathroom and whiten up my red shirt. As soon as I got back, I called Cliff and said, "What's wrong with my nose?" In about 42 seconds, he figured it out, cauterized it, and I was on my way. So thank you, Dr. Mcaren. And with that, I would like to carry on the program.
Thank you, Dan. Dean Gerson. You know, we ENT people, we carry cautery in our pockets, and it's an honor to have taken care of you and many others. This is a big honor for me as now CEO of University Hospitals. I've become a student of Cleveland history, and I believe the impact that Cleveland has had in the evolution of academic medicine in this country has not fully been recognized in terms of the impact it has had. You know, after the Flexner Report in the early 1900s, UH and the Hannas, as well as the Mathers, decided that the University Hospitals, and at the time Western Reserve Medical School, should be at the forefront of what's called modern medical education, which involved 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, and the concept that a medical school should be juxtaposed and partnered with a hospital so that the students can have a true learning environment. But one of the tenets of the Flexner Report, and what was embodied in UH and the case became one of the really early Council of Teaching Hospitals, was the notion that the physicians at the hospital would become faculty at the medical school, and part of the responsibilities, gratis, should be the teaching of medical students and the shepherding of those students in the second part of their medical career. And I would say that the partnership and, frankly, the symbiosis between university hospitals and now Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine has been one of the earliest and most successful partnerships that exist in the United States of America. And emblematic of that is the notion that the school will endow, they have lots of professorships, but the professorships they endow to clinical faculty at university hospitals only happens when there's been demonstrated excellence by the recipient, in this case Dr. Teal and Dr. Bambakidis, who truly embody the notion of servant leadership to the medical students and the residents and shepherd them along their career and take it as a personal duty to make sure that they are seeing the most important aspects of modern medicine. And it's very interesting that the roots of the names of the chairs are going to be given to the professorships are going to be given to Dr. Teal and to Dr. Bambakidis, have in their roots with the Livingstons and the Hannas, the people who created what we're sitting in today, which is University Circle. That was created so that our two institutions can live side by side and grow symbiotically. So I, at this point, have the pleasure of introducing our Senior Associate Dean and also our President of Academic Scientific Affairs, External Affairs, and the Ernie and Patty Novak Endowed Chair. Dr. Simon is probably one of the most brilliant academic leaders in this country. I'm asking him to use his incredible skills to go ahead and introduce and oversee this aspect of the program tonight. So, Dr. Simon.
So it is a pleasure to welcome you here this evening for this special investiture ceremony for the Arthur H. Bill Professorship in Obstetrics and Gynecology and the Harvey Huntington Brown Jr. Professorship in Neurosurgery at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. It is truly an honor and a privilege to participate with Dean Gerson in acknowledging the accomplishments of two illustrious physicians and renowned academic leaders, Dr. Stephanie Teal and Dr. Nick Bambakidis. For me, it is a particular honor to introduce Dr. Teal for appointment as the Arthur H. Bill Professor in Obstetrics and Gynecology. Dr. Teal joined Case Western Reserve University as a tenured professor and chair of reproductive biology and university hospitals as the obstetrician and gynecologist in chief and chair of obstetrics and gynecology in September of 2021. She was recruited from the University of Colorado School of Medicine, where she served as a tenured professor of obstetrics and gynecology, vice chair of faculty development and diversity, and chief of the Division of Complex Family Planning, with joint appointments in the Department of Pediatrics and Graduate Education. Dr. Teal is an honors and Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Stanford University and went on to complete her medical degree at the University of California, San Francisco, where she was elected to Alpha Omega Alpha. She completed her residency in OBGYN at UC San Diego Medical Center and her fellowship at Columbia University in New York, where she also earned a master's in public health and epidemiology. Throughout her career at the University of Colorado Children's Hospital and the Colorado Department of Public Health, Dr. Teal was a pioneering health services researcher in reduction of unintended and teen pregnancy, and in parallel ran many clinical trials in the development of novel contraceptive steroids and delivery systems. She innovated evidence-based regional and national programs and was a tireless advocate for reproductive health. Her clinical division routinely provided care for women from Montana to Kansas to Texas, more important than ever now. Beginning in 2007, Dr. Teal worked tirelessly with one of the largest foundations in the U.S. to develop the Colorado Family Planning Initiative. Following its launch in 2009, the initiative ultimately grew to an over $30 million statewide project that drove a 50% reduction in teen births and abortions, avoiding nearly $70 million in public assistance costs, and empowered thousands of young women to make their own choices on when or whether to start a family. The initiative included a collaboration of 16 agencies, the largest being the Colorado Department of Public Health, and provided training, clinician and staff education, statewide direct-to-patient marketing, and no-cost long-acting contraceptive methods. Her efforts changed medicine with respect to expectations of reproductive outcomes of adolescents, contributing to statewide improvements in low birth weight, preterm birth, and preeclampsia. She worked with colleagues across the country to convey the personal and public health savings of early intervention in reproductive health, influencing policymakers of all political stripes to support changes in access and funding. Since 2003, she has a continuous research funding from federal and foundation sources, including the NIH, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Society of Family Planning, the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation, the William and Floret Hewlett Foundation, and multiple industry sources for investigator-initiated research. She has published 152 peer-reviewed original works in addition to numerous book chapters and reviews. She is one of only a very few investigators who have twice won the Rory M. Pitkin Award for the Best Original Research of the Year, published in Obstetrics and Gynecology, the premier journal in her field. Dr. Teal's noteworthy contributions explored the problem of rapid repeat pregnancies after delivery, miscarriage or abortion, and tested clinical and public health interventions to increase time to repeat pregnancy and decrease related morbidity. In addition, Dr. Teel is a dedicated and productive educator and mentor. She has mentored trainees through completion of 3 PhDs, 2 DNPs, 15 MPH degrees, and the attainment of research funding from a variety of sources for her trainees. Her mentors now serve in faculty positions at Yale, Stanford, the Medical College of South Carolina, and many other elite institutions. In 2012, the Department of OBGYN of the University of Colorado received an endowment for a named award in faculty mentorship, and of course, Dr. Teel was the first recipient. Dr. Teel serves on the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the ACGME Standards Committee for Complex Family Planning. The UH Department of OBGYN has flourished under Stephanie's leadership, with 174 physicians and midwives in 9 divisions, 429 caregivers, and now over 8,000 deliveries annually. The department trains 24 residents and 9 fellows, and special programs of note include maternal fetal medicine and fetal intervention, reproductive endocrine and fertility, and female sexual health. So, in summary, my dear friend, Dr. Teel is a visionary leader with broad academic experience at her former institution, the University of Colorado, and presently at Case Western and UH. She has been a productive academic leader in women's health quality, education, and scholarship. Her work has shown keen ability to develop new knowledge and paradigms, envision change, and implement successful new models for healthcare that result in scientifically and clinically safer and improved outcomes for women, adolescents, and families. Stephanie.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Dan, for that lovely introduction and also for recruiting me here. I really appreciate it, and Cliff, same. We actually didn't meet in person until I was already hired because of COVID. In fact, both Dan and Cliff and Stan, I didn't meet any of them. Just the force of your personalities and your accomplishments and your love for Cleveland and UH and Case came through so clearly, even over Zoom. And I'm so honored to be here and appreciate it. And I'm going to speak today on the topic of how do we know when we're winning? So you heard I've done a lot of different things and been all over the country, and a lot of us in the audience, I think, have similar mindsets around moving forward and accomplishing things and getting things done. And sometimes we really don't know. When are we winning? How do we know? And I want to talk about that a little bit today. So this is The Joy of Life by Henri Matisse, and it's the quintessential image of winning. It includes love, peace, joy, music, some really beautiful colors, but it's actually not the piece of art I have hanging on my wall for those of you who've made the trek up to the 7th floor of McDonald Women's Hospital. What I have in a large version on my wall is The Triumph of Death by Peter Bruegel the Elder. It represents what motivates us as physicians and as scientists, the ever-encroaching and ultimately always winning disability and death. We talk about the war on cancer, battling infertility, fighting to save the smallest babies, overcoming barriers that cause health disparities. And in this backdrop of war metaphors, right, you try to win wars. How do we know when we're winning? So, let's see. Through the ages, winning in academic medicine was really characterized by this concept of the triple threat, this individualized, individualistic, focus-driven, obsessed, frequently surgeon, walking down the hallways, our coattails flapping behind us, followed by medical students, naming diseases, procedures, and instruments after ourselves as we went. But in the late 20th and early 21st century, medicine has been distinguished, as really all society has, by an explosion of knowledge in every field. The amount of knowledge has become so great and so cross-linked across fields that it causes almost unbearable complexity. People who study complexity theory have identified that managing it requires greater and greater degrees of specialization, which in turn requires a culture of collaboration if we're all going to be that specialized, communication and appreciation of a group success. This is the opposite of the traditional medical values of individualism and complete autonomy. So, returning to the concept of the triple threat individual in academic medicine, I'd like to propose that a tripartite mission is not big enough. I would like to talk about the pentad mission, because without service to the community and advocacy for our community, the traditional areas actually have minimal lasting value. So, how does this strategic approach of bringing in different highly specialized collaborators to meet a single goal play out? And I thought I would show you a model of one of our transformational statewide projects, the Colorado Family Planning Initiative. So you can see in the middle of this model the mission statement. My belief is there is no mission that cannot be encapsulated in 7 words or less. And this $30 million project is encapsulated in 3: reduce unintended pregnancy. That's our mission. In the green sector, can't talk without using a pointer. There we go. In the green sector, you can see the clinico-medical strategy of increased use of long-acting reversible contraceptives. And this was the strategy that could be actuated by physicians, midwives, and nurse practitioners. But in complex systems, that is not going to actually result in lasting change. We need to reach beyond ourselves to complete the mission. So breaking out one of the strategies into the tactics, which are here in the gray bars, we start to see how incorporating service, advocacy, communication, collaboration are not just good ideas, but integral to the success of meeting the mission. We need to go beyond clinicians to advance strategy. And here, again, other collaborators that we needed to bring in. So, of course, a project like this leads to many measurables in terms of what we value in academic medicine. Publications, research funding. We built clinical and research careers for many, many of our mentees. But what we also did was deeply affect our local and regional communities, and ultimately, the national conversation. I always like these headlines because you can see here the lessons and stories from Colorado's surprisingly effective approach, and Colorado's efforts a startling success. I always, like to be underestimated. Just makes it that much sweeter. So, speaking of, here in Northeast Ohio, we have extraordinary challenges in front of us. I'm not sure if you can read the title here. This is from 2020, and this is what I was looking at when I was considering taking this position. The best and worst metropolitan areas for Black women's health overall, for Black women's overall outcomes. And here is Cleveland. And I think you all know about maternal mortality and how it is going in the U.S. And it's nothing for us to be proud of, I would say, as a nation, unfortunately. So this brings us extraordinary opportunities. It brings us the opportunity to forge connections with all of our various communities to change lives in our community for the better. We are unlikely to save every pregnancy, and we are unlikely to cure every cancer or never have a surgical error. That can't be the standard for winning. We can't save every patient. We can't make every person physically whole again. But the highest calling of medicine, I believe, is to work together to help our patients live their best lives with dignity. And when we collaborate to reach a goal or solve a problem, that is the feeling of winning. And I am accepting this professorship with a humble heart. This is an extension of the privilege to serve, and I encourage everyone to step out of your comfort zone, to speak up, to influence anything that affects the health and well-being of those who trust us and who don't have our power, and to bring others into your coalition. This is my favorite verse from Esther. Perhaps you were created for a time such as this. Whenever times get hard, and as Dan alluded to, the last few years have been a little rough in women's health, I just remind myself, perhaps you were created for such a time as this. So I would like to start by thanking first Patty DePompe, who has been my tireless partner since really before I arrived. I'd like to thank our staff, our faculty, and especially my compadres, comadres, the women chairs. And ultimately, I am nobody without the four people in this picture. So thank you so much, Scott, for bringing love and a little bit of chill back into my life. It's not easy. And Sophia and Griffin, I want to formally apologize for locking you in my office in the hospital that time when I had to go operate on somebody and the nanny was stuck in Indianapolis. Please, it's been many years, forgive me. Thank you. Thank you.
It is now an honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Nicholas C. Bambakidis for appointment as the Harvard Huntington Brown Jr. Professorship in Neurosurgery at Case Western Reserve University. Dr. Bambakidis currently serves as the Chair, Department of Neurological Surgery and Vice President of the Neurological Institute at Universities Hospitals. He is also Professor of Neurological Surgery at Case Western Reserve University. Dr. Bambakidis received his medical degree from Case Western in 1997 and completed a neurosurgery residency at UH before fellowship training at Barrow Neurological Institute, the preeminent center for complex intracranial skull-based and cerebrovascular surgery. Dr. Bambakidis was recruited to UH in 2008 and quickly became the director of cerebrovascular and skull-based surgery. He is nationally and internationally recognized as a leader in this field. He has an incredibly busy clinical practice focused on the management of acoustic neuromas and other skull-based tumors, as well as cerebrovascular disorders. This includes cerebral aneurysm treatment, the management of arterial venous malformations, as well as endovascular treatment for stroke. He has worked closely and collaboratively with members of otolaryngology, as well as providers in neuroradiology and neurology, in establishing UH as a leader in the field of skull-base and cerebrovascular surgery. The UH Neurological Institute has flourished under Nick's leadership with over 400 caregivers in 9 clinical centers, performing 2,600 surgeries and 600 neurointerventional procedures annually. The NI trains, along with his great partner, Dr. Sila, of course, in neurology, 65 neurology and neurosurgery residents and 21 fellows. Special programs include, among many others, implementing AI programs for early stroke detection, ROSA robot platform for functional neurosurgery, robotic spine surgery programs, and robust brain health clinical research trials for Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Bambakidis has actively pursued cutting-edge research focusing on CNS recovery after injury. He served as the site principal investigator for multiple clinical trials, including the prevention and treatment of vasospasm with clozentan. Under his direction, UH served as an international leader, one of the highest enrolling sites in recruitment of patients for this pharmaceutical trial, investigating the role of clozanistan in the setting of aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage. Dr. Bambakidis' career here at university hospitals also includes serving as the program director of the neurosurgery residency program from 2011 to 2021. He has published 102 peer-reviewed original works in addition to numerous book chapters and invited reviews. Importantly, Dr. Bambakidis has edited 3 major textbooks on skull-based and craniocervical spinal surgery and has published extensively in prestigious medical journals on an array of topics in his field of expertise. He has lectured nationally and internationally as a recognized expert on skull-based surgery and has served as a course director of the annual CNS Skull-Based Fellowship course since 2019. In 2016, he became a key advisor in the CNS Nexus project, a unique and comprehensive online library of neurosurgical cases designed to better prepare trainees for the operating, which boasts a case catalog now of hundreds of examples. He is internationally recognized in the professional medical organizations pertinent to the field of neurological surgery. In October 2021, he was sworn in as president of the Congress of Neurological Surgeons. CNS is the largest neurosurgical organization in the world, with over 10,000 members globally dedicated to advancing neurosurgery through education and innovation, and to inspiring and facilitating scientific discovery in its translation to clinical practice of neurosurgery. He is also active in many other professional organizations, including the Society of Neurological Surgeons, the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, the North American Skull-Based Society, and the Society of Neurointerventional Surgery. He serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Neurosurgery, while also serving as an active reviewer on multiple journals. In summary, my good friend Nick, we're baseball and javelin buddies, Dr. Bambakidis has been a productive academic leader in neurological surgery quality, education, and scholarship. His work has shown keen ability to develop new knowledge and paradigms, envision change, and implement successful new models for neurosurgical diagnosis that result in scientifically and clinically safer and improved outcomes for not only his patients, but for patients globally. Nick, please join me on the podium.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Cliff, and thank you, Dean Gerson. It's an honor to be recognized by the School of Medicine as the Harvey Huntington Brown Jr. Chair in Neurological Surgery. It's a rare endowed chair. I think it's one of the few that that is carried both at the school and at UH. I've had the privilege, as Dan mentioned, of leading the neurosurgical department since 2022. We continue to grow with 18 faculty members and 17 residents, many of whom are here today under my direct order. So I, again, appreciate Dean Gerson and the School of Medicine for the special recognition. Endowed chairs like this allow us to continue our core mission to heal, teach, and discover and retain the best and recruit the best and brightest faculty members. Our department is strong. It continues to build on the successes of those who've come before us. It's a huge theme in our department, with myself as only the third chair to lead it since 1953. You can see Dr. Nelson, who was the first chair of what was then the Division of Neurologic Surgery, Dr. Ratchison and Dr. Salmon immediately before me. That's kind of cool. As Stan mentioned, the chair was established upon the death of Mr. Brown Jr. in 1950, and in 1953 the chair was used to recruit Dr. Nelson, who at that time was an associate professor at Penn under Francis C. Grant and was a rising star in neurosurgery, having done his residency at the Peter Brigham Women's and Children's Hospital in Boston, and then served in the U.S. Army Medical Corps at Cushing Hospital near Boston in World War II. A few words on Mr. Brown Jr. As Stan mentioned, he was a philanthropist and industrialist. He was on the board of UH since 1940 and trustee since 1941. He was also a trustee representative on the very important Medical Council, which guided, at that time, the relationship between the hospitals and the medical school. And in 1946, he became the vice president, and the following year, president of UH, and had a lifelong interest in both the hospital and the medical school, which was demonstrated by his gift of $200,000 to both the hospital and school on his death, as approved by the boards in 1950. It took a lot of digging in the plain dealer to get all this information, but it was noted at the time, as was mentioned, the gift was added to by his friends, including Leonard H. Hanna, who is a descendant of Mark Hanna, dedicated to Hanna Pavilion at UH and the Hanna House, where our current offices are, and Dean Joseph T. Wern of the medical school. Interestingly, he did pass away from a neurosurgical condition, although I tried to find out what that was. I couldn't figure it out. It could have been almost anything, but that's prompted his interest in neurosurgery and his gift upon his death. And as I mentioned, it allowed, of course, for the recruitment of Dr. Nelson, who was a fantastic choice given the fact that he led the department for 30 years. I think probably a record that will stand for quite some time as first division and then department chair. Dr. Nelson trained a record number of chairs populating academic departments throughout the country. Those of you who are familiar with neurosurgery, and there couldn't be a bigger division between fields, between OB and neurosurgery than is evidenced today, but would recognize some of these names and leaders in the field, folks like Robert Spetzler, who I personally mentored under at the Barrow Neurologic Institute, and also served as a co-fellow with my vice chair, Dr. Hanjani, in the 1980s. He was part of the faculty at UH. Additionally, Dr. Nelson was always famous for his quote, as you can see at the bottom left, regarding the importance of training the next generation, something that's truly an integral fabric of the department today. As was mentioned, the department continues to have a national reputation for leadership in the specialty. Dr. Salmon, who preceded me, was president of the Society of Neurological Surgeons, as Cliff would say, one of our silly societies, which is one of the oldest professional societies in our field, made up of chairs and program directors in 2022. And as Dan mentioned, I was president and had a wonderful annual meeting. You can see Cliff was one of our keynote speakers in 2022. But that has continued, and we have many prominent members, some of whom are here today. Dr. Tiffany Hodges, who's on the board of the CNS. Dr. Hanjani, my vice chair, as treasurer of our other large national, because we're neurosurgeons, we have to have two very large national organizations. The American Association of Neurological Surgeons, Dr. Tomei, represented on the Washington Committee, Dr. Jen Sweet, completing a term as vice president of the CNS, and I could go on regarding the things that our department does on the national stage. This is our most recent department photo. It demonstrates the fantastic group of faculty and residents we've assembled. It's truly, I can tell you, a world-renowned group, diverse in practice, background, and abilities. In fact, I think we've achieved what I personally think is the goal of the movement, celebrating diversity, if you will, in that we really don't talk about it much anymore, to be honest with you. It's just part of the culture, and we hire the best folks that we can get, and this is what you see in front of you. And I think that's really what we all need to strive for together. This photo emphasizes my point that not only are these are the women in the department, they had to drag me kicking and screaming into this photograph. Technical superstars to comprise nearly 40% of the department. It's in a field where the board certification rate for women is about 6%. We also have an amazing group of residents at the Case Western University Neurosurgery program. You can see here, it takes a lot to capsize a jet ski, but they managed to do it. They also are towing a kayak. I have no idea why. We have 17 now, and because our program is so strong and growing, we've been approved to increase our resident complement to 21 residents total in the program. You can see here, and we do a lot of great activities together in terms of camaraderie, and we continue to grow. We've seen tremendous growth in the department, up to 18 individuals, mirroring the growth of UH under Cliff's leadership. And I personally use the funds from the endowed chair, for which I'm being invested today, to help fund our skull-based courses and our postdoctoral research fellow, who records all of our skull-based and vascular neurosurgical cases, as Dan mentioned, that we archive in a video archive that neurosurgeons use around the world to improve care of the patients with the most complicated neurosurgical diseases. This is very different than residency in 1998. You can see here in the top right, I'm a resident, this PGY2. It's probably why I'm still smiling. I must have finished a rotation shortly thereafter with Gilles Pinot, who's my chief resident at the time, who's in the back. And that's probably why I'm in a good mood. But my co-PGY2 is typical of what a neurosurgery resident had on her face at that time. And under our leader, Dr. Ratchison. But again, very different from residency at that time. Stephanie and I decided we wouldn't have any baby photos in this presentation today, but I had to dig up one residency photo where I'm smiling with a lot more black hair and corduroy pants, which I thought were interesting. I did want to bring up my upbringing, nevertheless. My brother is here today. He traveled from Portland to visit. My other brother couldn't make it. These are my parents, who have since passed away. My mother, who died from a glioblastoma, ironically. She came from this country, from a small island in the Aegean Sea that was bombed incessantly during her infancy in World War II. She spoke no English. She learned how to drive. My dad taught her how to do that. And hard work in our family, as my brother can attest to, is a foregone conclusion. So my own story is not one of military excellence or athletic heroism, although I tried. But rather, it's really one of hard work, plain and simple, a devotion of my parents, who have, again, since passed away, imbued to me. And my brother, this is my old man, here he is powerlifting right before he became a student at Akron, and then a physics major at what was in the Case Institute of Technology. He's doing the snatch. I'll let you add up the barbell weight. He dislocated his elbow. He won the state championship. He was on his way to the Olympics, and unfortunately was unable to fulfill that dream. But if anyone wants to try this, it's very challenging powerlifting move. As Dan mentioned, I graduated from the school in 1997. My affection can't be understated. Some of you may not know who this is. This is Dr. John Jack Coy. He was associate dean. I think he became dean in 1945 and is a legend at the school, really. He interviewed me. He must have been in his mid to late 80s when he did that. I don't remember a lot about my interview except to say my application wasn't that good. But the details aren't important. I do remember some of the pointed questions he asked me, and it made me realize what a gift he had in identifying people who had the potential to not only be great doctors but leaders in the field. And then here I am 31 years later as chair of the Department of Neurological Surgery. That the gift he had is a hard one to emulate, especially in our modern paradigm of evaluating students with not a lot of objective metrics. He had that. We do our best to emulate that when we interview students for residency as best we can. I think we've done a pretty good job. We're fond of this particular paper published in the Journal of Neurological Surgery. You can see as an absolute number, Case Western Reserve has trained the most students in neurological surgery at 40 over this period of time from 2014 to 2020. You might say, well, you have a lot of medical institutions here. We almost double Harvard. There are at least, Seppi, 4 training programs in the Boston area, so it's not just that. I think we incorporate actively into the department lectures, into research meetings. We have, I know Tiffany runs over to the medical school and does journal club. We have a second-year rotation for students. They can come over for a week as third years. And I think it's a unique stepping stone for our outstanding Case students, and says a lot about what they bring to the table. And I can say with a relative degree of certainty we were doing something different, something I think the late Dr. Coy would be proud of, and utilizing some of that art, if you will, of attracting the best and brightest to our field. And so with that, I think I'll end again by thanking the School of Medicine and Dean Gerson, Dan, and Cliff for this honor and recognition. I'm fortunate to have an amazing family team behind me with Eva, my daughter, who's doing her surgery clerkship as a third-year student. I get a kick out of seeing her in the OR, I'm not going to lie. And Peter is just now putting his application for medical school. I don't know where he wants to go, but I'm not shy about telling people where I'd like to see him go. Without them and my lovely wife, Kim, I never would have gotten to where I am, and I'm eternally grateful. Thank you.
So those are two very hard acts to follow of passionate accomplishment and gracious acceptance of these investiture positions. And I really hope, as do Cliff and Dan, that you both hold these professorships for a very long time. They're meaningful for us to bestow, but even, I hope, more meaningful for you to occupy and keep us strong as a medical center and a medical school. And it goes without saying that these professorships are really a mark of our respect for your accomplishments and the future that you bring to us. So I would now like to bring Stephanie and Nick back up so that we can have you sit in the chairs. got to make sure that you sit in the right chair. So I'd like the audience to accept Stephanie Teel as the Arthur Bill Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and Dr. Nick Bambakidis as the Harvey Huntington Brown Jr. Professor of Neurosurgery. We're going to take a few photos with the academic leaders, with the individuals. The rest of us can head out. There'll be a small reception outside, so enjoy yourselves and hang around and wait till we all come out. Thank you.